purpose of this video is to show you what I do when I'm feeling a little bit nervous. So the beauty of standing up on this podium is that A, it gives me some height, which makes me feel safer, and B, they've got like a defined area that they can see to move around, and I feel safer that they're not going to come in at me. So it gives me a nice place where it might be more psychological than actually real, but I feel as though I'm much safer. Therefore, I can concentrate on my timing and my body positioning instead of wondering what the horse is doing. So here I'm just working on sending his shoulder around and then disengaging the hindquarters to get him to stop. So sending his shoulder off that way, and then in a second I'm going to shorten up my rein, my lead rope, and disengage his hindquarters to get him to stop and look at me and stop. So, and then I'm going to go the other way by suggesting which direction I want him to go with my rope hand and just directing a bit of energy at that inside shoulder. And then shortening up the rope, looking at his hindquarters. That one wasn't so hot. To do a little flick with the whip. So the next thing I'm going to do is put my cone out. So this is back to the exercise that I showed you in the lunging video. So now I've got to practice and check that I can really send that inside shoulder around that cone by sending a little bit more energy towards it. I'm going to change the rein again and checking that I can get him to go behind the cone. So you can start off with the cone quite close to you, and then you can push it further and further out until you're almost onto that lunging circle. There I go, pushing my cone further out. So you're checking that you've got control of that inside shoulder from a position where I feel really nice and super safe. So I'm going to use my right hand with my rope in it to suggest the direction and just send some energy down towards that inside shoulder. And then as soon as he moves, I do my 3 R's. I release, meaning I stop asking. I reward, I tell him he's a good boy. And I just relax and let him get on with it. So you don't have to have a fancy podium like mine. You can use anything. Just make sure that it's big enough for you not to walk over backwards and fall off it, and that it's not slippy. So you can practice a few steps of back up from here as well. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is what we did on the video, the ABCs of groundwork. So I'm going to do a little bit of moving his hindquarters and moving his forehand. I'm going to do it slightly differently from this position. So I'm going to ask him to move around me like the hand of a clock, so in a more parallel fashion. So even though it's not perfect, you're starting to feel that you've got a little bit more control of all the body parts. Your horse is starting to understand that they have to move certain bits away from you when you ask them to. So you're building your own confidence that you can move them around and starting to develop like the most basic form of communication with them. That's it. And just noticing when you do these exercises, is one way easier than the other? Do they find it easier to move in one direction than the other? And it's just feedback, it doesn't really matter to start with. Just notice if it gets any better, if it continues. Might be worth speaking to a physio or a vet about it if you see something that's really markedly different between one side or the other. So what am I going to do next? Okay, so now I'm going to start moving the shoulder. Am I? Am I doing another hindquarter yield? Another hindquarter yield, I think. Just wasn't quite parallel enough there. And then a nice release, reward, and relax, telling him he's a good boy. And this is a nice exercise for when you start to build up to your liberty work as well. Because when you can get those hindquarters to move over like that without the front end stepping forwards and around, that really is the start of your draw. Because when the hind end moves over, the head looks towards you, and then when you take a step back, then that's the start of the draw. Okay, so I'm getting bored of this now, Louise. Come on, move on to the forehand. Okay, so now I'm asking those shoulders to step sideways. So did you see how that off 4 stepped sideways? And I'm going to ask him to stop again. And now I'm going to ask the near 4 to step sideways. That's it. So it's a really good suppling exercise, getting the forehand to move like that. But it's also really nice for feeling safe, because he's actually really good for a lad of his sort of stature, bless him. But sometimes these big sturdy types, they're really clumsy with that inside foreleg, and they often walk into you. So really standing on something like this and feeling that you can step that inside shoulder away from you and get them to move away out onto the circle is really, really good for boosting confidence. Oh, somebody, I'm on the school run, shouting next to me. Okay, so there I'm just going to practice a few changes of rein, moving that shoulder around. So if you get a bit clumsy with the swapping the rein over and the stick and everything, you can just pop the stick down for this one and just swing the end of the rope a little bit to add a bit of energy towards that inside shoulder. That's it. So it's just a nice little short session just to get some confidence.